Welcome back. It's been a little while since my last video on the 617, so I thought now's about time to give you a little bit of an update on some of the new features and updates I've made to the camera, as well as some exciting new possible developments in the near future. Before I get into that though, there is a couple of people who mentioned they'd love to see sort of an overview of the camera without having to watch 3, 4, 5 videos of how I've built the entire camera. So at the end of this video, I've put together a little run through of how the camera functions and from using the front standard, rear standard, how the film back connects and so on. So that'll be available at the end of the video. Timecode is here if you want to skip straight to that, but otherwise on to the updates. The biggest major change that I've made to the camera recently is I've been working on, once again, the rigidity of the front and rear standards. For those of you who've watched the videos from the beginning of this camera build, will remember the very first camera I built, I actually had the front and rear brackets for the front and rear standards printed out of aluminium, just to give me like maximum rigidity possible. Because in my testing, when I printed with PLA with my original design, it was just a little bit floppy, is probably the best way to put it. Since then though, I've been doing a lot of work. Printing with carbon fiber made things a little bit better, but still it wasn't up to a level I was incredibly happy with. So I decided I threw out the entire design for the front and rear standard and started again from scratch. And I'm happy to say, after a lot of work and a lot of tweaking, I've managed to completely redesign primarily the rear standard, so that now you can print it out of PLA and it'll be as rigid as you could possibly want. The front standard has also had a few tweaks, but mainly it's the rear standard where the changes have happened. Got a little sample of it here. So this is just one portion of the rear standard. And what I've done is, if you can see here, is there's now a locking mechanism where the rear standard slots into, so that when it's got its, still has its shift movement, but there is a lot more meat and a lot more surface area holding the rear standard bracket up, so that it cannot move at all vertically when the bellows and the whole camera is attached to it. The benefit of this is you still get your shift movement. You do lose the rear tilt back and forth. However, that is an incredibly rarely used feature as far as I can see from my research, so I was happy to give that up. But with this new design, you can now print the entire rear standard out of PLA and it's incredibly rigid. You can still print it out of carbon fiber, and I still do for the cameras that I sell, just because I have carbon fiber in stock, but it's not necessarily 100% necessary. You can do it all out of PLA and get an incredibly rigid result. Same thing with the front standard. It's just a little thicker and there's a bit more gusseting in the front standard, so removing any of that sort of slight movement that can happen, especially when you are using very heavy lenses. So those updated files are now available for download. Anybody who's purchased the 3D files before can re-download them and print off new versions of the standard if they've printed off the old version of the standard. And as always, it's completely free for any existing users, and in fact any new features or additions I make to the 3D files will always be free. I'm never going to charge for additional features. I just think that's a bit of nickel and diming. The next other big change is removable bellows. So I have here a rear standard, and this is the front standard, and I've updated the design to support neodymium magnets. There are 24 in all. To be honest, it's probably a little overkill. I don't think we really need 24, but this way there's absolutely zero chance of the bellows disconnecting when you least want them to. With these, you get a very nice, satisfying connection, and you can therefore connect up your bellows, and you can remove the bellows with a little bit of force. What this means is you can change out bellows. So here I have a pre-production set of TPU printed bellows. These are still in the works. I haven't released the files for these yet because I've yet to be able to print off a set that I am completely happy with in terms of light tightness, but also being able to compact the way I'd like them to. But what this does mean is you'll be able to, for instance, you might want to start off by creating your own set of bellows, but then later on down the track you might want to purchase a set of bellows off the website, which you could then clip those in. The other big reason I did this though is because it occurred to me that view cameras, for the most part, the main part of the body of the view camera is format agnostic. It doesn't really care whether it's a 617 view camera or a 4x5 camera. Most of the mechanics of a view camera are the same across all different cameras. So then it got me thinking, it wouldn't really take a lot for me to design a new rear standard that could be attached to the 617 camera instead of the 617 rear standard, and with a set of bellows to match, you'd be able to convert your 617 camera to a 4x5 camera very simply. Now, I am still doing work of designing this. I'm not sort of locking in any particular date where I will be launching it or releasing it. In fact, I'm not even guaranteeing that I will. If I get to a point where I'm not happy with it, I won't do it. But at the moment, I'm quietly hopeful. I'm doing a lot of work of designing how I want the graph lock back to insert, because most of the 4x5 cameras I've seen tend to use like rubber straps or different forms of elastic straps that you can sort of insert the graph lock in between the ground glass. And I don't particularly like that. I've seen far too many issues of people not inserting them correctly and causing light leaks. So I'm taking a little bit of a different approach. That is requiring a lot more testing and a lot more 3D designing. But when and if those files become available, obviously I'll pop it on the website. Also, there is the blog on the website. So if any of you who have downloaded the 3D files in the past, always keep an eye on the blog, because that's where I will announce any changes or major changes to the 3D files that you can then re-download or download and update features of your camera. Speaking of changes or features that have been added to the camera, one that happened very recently was I was taking the camera out on a shoot, and the particular composition I had was something I'd never done with a view camera before. I had the camera tilted so that it was almost heading towards vertical. It was a very steep angle. And when I set up the shot, I had a quite a heavy 210mm lens. I noticed that my front standard was slipping. I would focus it, and when I'd let go, the front standard would slowly drift back. Now, many view cameras have a way of stopping this by they have a lockout on the left-hand screw. So basically the front standard, you've got your focusing on the right, and they use a lock or a nut on the left-hand side. I never designed that into the camera because I didn't particularly like the idea of having separate functions on the left and right of camera. I like the ability of having the front and the left and right knobs connected so that I can focus with either or both for that matter. And I just didn't like the nut approach, as it were. However, obviously, when I used the camera almost vertically, I noticed that there was an issue. So I decided to look and see if there's a way I could design my way around that. And so what I've done is I've designed a front standard lock. So you'll see here, it's a very small little part. It's easily added to existing cameras. The only thing you have to change really, apart from the two tiny 3D printed parts, is you change out these two screws from 6mm to 8mm M3s. So you have your camera where it's fully focusable, but at any stage, if you want to lock the front standard, it can no longer move. So you can have the camera at any angle and it will not move. Undo the lock, and you can still move the front standard. So that lockout is also, the files are available for download as well, for those of you who want to add that to your camera. It's probably not something that you would use on a regular basis, but it is nice to have, especially if you're going to be putting your camera in a situation, especially with larger lenses. The last thing in terms of updates is the price. Because the Australian dollar is tanking, I've been able to lower the price of the fully built cameras that I have. So they're now $995 US. I'll try and keep that price as long as I can. Realistically, it just depends on how long the Australian dollar continues to tank. So if you're considering or looking or thinking about buying a fully built 617 camera, probably suggest you get onto that sooner rather than later, because at some stage eventually I hope the Australian dollar will return to its moderately bearable rate, and then I'll have to put the price up again. But I will try and keep it down as low as possible, as long as possible. And so for those people who wanted a quick run through of how the camera actually functions, I now have a quick little video that you can view of basically the functionality of the camera. And so with that, we're pretty much done. All of the new features that have been added to the camera, I have updated the build video or the instruction video explaining how to install the different removable bellow options, as well as the lockout switch, and also the rear standard, the way to basically tolerance that so it works perfectly. Those updates have been made to the build video, and that's live now. You can go and view that as you are building your camera. But otherwise, until next time, say hi to your dog for me.